Welcome to the Political Power Hour with your host, former congressional candidate, retired federal agent, and three-time author, Michael Vilardi, highlighting today's political hot topics with the most interesting political candidates in the 2022 election. The most hard-hitting political commentary on the air today. Enjoy the show.
I'm your host, Mike Vilardi. Welcome to another great show, the Political Power Hour. I'm back with Keith Feit. Keith, welcome back to the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Always a pleasure to be here.
And we are only a couple of weeks out from Election Day, and I got to tell you, I am pissed. I am really pissed. Today, President Biden announced that they're going to drain the strategic reserve again to keep gas prices low, which is just a ruse. This inflation is unbelievable. All the Democrats can talk about is abortion, which now has reverted back to the states and is no longer an issue because the Supreme Court has handed it back to the states. So there's nothing that's going to happen at the federal level. They're never going to get legislation passed that's going to make it legal all over the place. Right. It's just not going to happen. Nope. Since Roe v. Wade happened in 1973, they weren't able to do it. Now that we have the Darrow decision and it goes back to the states, each state will address that issue. So I look at this as being a red herring because people can't put gas in their car. They can't afford the price of food. And here in Palm Beach County, we had a 42% increase in rents, which affected me directly. I mean, I'm now going to be paying an extra $600 a month, right, to stay, even though I'm going to be relocating to northern Florida and building a house. The house has been delayed. Why? Because the subcontractors are now going to Fort Myers, right, where they had the hurricane, and so my house can't get built, and I took a $600 a month hit. And of course, you know, I'm pretty much on a fixed income like anybody else, being retired, but it is just astounding that they will not address the real issues that are affecting the American family. And those issues are the price of gasoline, inflation, interest rates. People can't afford homes anymore. And what's happened? The stock market has taken a hit. We are now officially in a bear market. People's 401ks have gotten killed the last few months. I'm outraged by this. And in this particular race, this congressional race, District 22, Lois Frankel is running ads all over the place about abortion. And I just have to address this, and I want to read Dan Francis, who is her opponent, and I believe is a great, great candidate and should win. Here's his response to her. He said, "Dear Representative Frankel, it has come to my attention that you are running advertisements that make false accusations about me. Your attacks are not based on fact. Furthermore, you can't cite and document your accusations because they are lies." And unfortunately, this has been another tactic of the Democratic Party where they lie. They'll lie about people's character. They'll lie about the issues. They'll make stuff up, and all just to stay in power. Instead of doing a good job, I mean, look at New York City. Have you seen New York City lately?
It's disgraceful.
This 61-year-old woman who was a firefighter, an EMT, stabbed ordering a hoagie at a bodega. Why? Because they have this no bail law. You could murder somebody and you're out.
Right.
But if you're a citizen carrying a gun, they'll put you away for that because they don't want you to protect yourself. How backwards and perverted is that? And this is what happens when Democrats get control, whether it be New York State. Look at California. They got tent cities all over the place. Look at San Francisco. I mean, you can't walk down the sidewalks of San Francisco. Who wants to go to San Francisco?
No, it's disgusting.
It is absolutely disgusting. And I'm personally outraged because if the Republicans don't take back Congress and the Senate and sweep the governor races, America is done. We're going to become a third world communist country. So I digress. Let me read the rest of Dan's response to Lois Frankel's hideous ads. Your ads say that I support a national abortion ban. This is a lie. I have never made such a statement. I am a constitutionalist, and I believe that powers not explicitly granted to the federal government are reserved for the states. And that's what the Supreme Court decision does. It simply takes the power back to the states where it should be. Should be a states' right issue, nothing else.
There's two things, Mike, about the left.
Yep.
Number one, either they don't know the Constitution, or number two, they don't care about the Constitution. And that's what it is.
Yeah, and I think we see it now more than ever, because when you get liberals in power, or communists in some certain cases, we've seen a national disaster like I've never seen in my lifetime. Whether it be Lightfoot in Chicago, Adams in New York, Newsom in California, Kutchel in New York as governor. She's just horrible. Okay? Absolutely horrible. You see the destructions of these cities, and you see people fleeing, running to the red states, but then they put a massive amount of money into the red states to convert them to blue.
Right. And the not so funny thing is that the Democrats' plan, as always, is to lie, distort, and basically put out this illusion to trick the voters.
Right.
And so what they like to say is that a majority of the 10 highest states with the highest crime rates are red states.
Right.
But what they're not telling you is that those crime rates are high because of the big cities in those states that are run all by Democrats.
Right.
And those are those cities are what's jacking up the crime rates in those red states. So, but they don't want to tell you that. They don't want to, they don't want voters to know the truth, which is why they keep harping on abortion, because they have nothing at all to run on.
Well, but of course, Joe Biden did come out and say this is a red hot economy, and the economy is just doing super.
He did, and he also talked about his student debt relief today.
Yeah.
But I think he's actually screwed up, and what he's doing is he's not taking debt away from people. He's taking their retirement savings away from people, because I know I've lost 25% of my retirement savings.
Absolutely, right.
So
Yeah,
maybe the old man is just a little confused again.
Well, I got to do it. It is kind of funny, but it is sad that you see the other day when he was looking at the screen, and he goes, and DOT spells out the word dot. Or what was it? Made in America. 2 words. Made in America.
Two words. Made in America. Well, he also a few years ago was a 3-letter word.
Jobs.
JOBS.
Right,
jobs.
right.
So, good old Joe.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it is sad, and we see lies like never before. And I don't think people are buying it. He's getting out there saying the economy's red hot, it's great, we've created more jobs than ever before since Jimmy Carter, which is not an administration you want to attach yourself to, but he does.
Well, they have a lot in common.
But you know what? If we don't get the American people out to vote and educate the low information voter and turn this around for this country, it's over. Because here's what's going to happen. We get to January, the Inflation Reduction Act that they signed puts additional regulation on gas and oil, which means you are going to have higher prices. So what's happening now is this Band-Aid effect, okay, where they got mad at, the administration got mad at Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia came out and said, hey, we're cutting production, we're going to keep prices high, we don't care if you like it or don't like it. So now he's going to use the strategic reserve, which specifically is supposed to be used for national emergencies like Hurricane Ian that we saw, or times of war. Because if you can't put fuel in your bomber planes, your jet fighters, or your tanks, you can't win a war. And he's intentionally taking that reserve down to near zero to try and win an election.
And it's all about the election.
It's all about the election.
We see that he tried to get Saudi Arabia. He's okay with them cutting back oil production and the price of gas skyrocketing, but he wants them to wait a month until after the midterm elections. And I don't know why any voter would trust the Democrat Party when you looked at how they just threw their own man, Joe Manchin, under the bus. They made a deal with him to put his energy provisions into the last spending bill. And of course, the far left made a stink about it, and he wound up taking it out. So you can't trust anything these people say. It's all about them staying in power, and they don't care how much they have to lie. They don't care who has to get hurt, as long as they remain in power and they're pushing this far left, woke, destructive, anti-American agenda.
Yes, and by staying in power, though, they destroy themselves. They make themselves look foolish. I would think that Joe Biden would have been better off taking the money that he got from, the University of Pennsylvania, China, and just retiring and enjoying his final years.
That was an ego thing. It's all
that was
about
an ego thing. So now he's making a fool of himself, going to go down as one of the worst presidents ever in America.
Absolutely.
And the question is, was it intentional? Was it intentional to sell out to China? He was selling our oil from to China,
right?
Which is really our enemy.
No doubt.
I mean, it's mind-blowing to me, and that's why I'm so hyped up today. But I have to finish this letter because Dan did a tremendous job of addressing this abortion issue. Your false claims about my stand on this issue are unacceptable. I demand you immediately remove your ads making these false claims as well as other lies. If you do not, I will be forced to take legal action. As you know, the matter of abortion in the state of Florida is settled law that was completely unaffected by the repeal of Roe v. Wade. Your insistence on discussing this topic, and this topic only, is not only a disgraceful tactic to distract and divert attention from the serious problems we face, but it is an affront to the people of District 22. There are many dire issues that need to be discussed. Out of control inflation, an economy on the verge of collapse, record high gas and food prices, increased crime, and open borders, which have led to 300 deaths per day in this country due to fentanyl overdoses and a myriad of other related problems. I realize you do not want to talk about these issues because they are a direct result of your failed policies. The people are suffering, and you have only lies to tell about me. You are failing our district. The people know it. You know it. And that is why there is enormous support behind my campaign. Instead of hiding behind your lies, join me in the debate on how to fix the serious problems that are plaguing our great nation. Sincerely, Dan Francis. Now, I've been behind Dan since the very beginning because I do believe he's a great candidate and he needs to win this race. Even though it's a highly Democratic district, you can't allow these people to get away with using a red herring. That's all abortion is now. It's a red herring. It's settled law. Next, go on to something else. It shows Lois Frankel is a very weak congresswoman. She has done nothing to help the people here in the district. And she can't run on her record. She can't get up there and say, look what I've done, because she hasn't done anything. And that's what's disgusting. When you have Congress people who are there for years like she has been and have no record of accomplishment to run on, and instead what you have to do is instill fear into people in hopes that they'd vote for you instead of the other person because you create a situation where, oh my God, if we don't vote for Lois, we're going to lose our abortion rights. Well, guess what? It's a states' right issue anyway. Lois has zero say in it. Zero, nothing.
Right. But that's again, it goes back to the Democrat playbook.
It does.
None of these Democratic incumbents have a record that they can run on.
Right.
They've supported these policies that have led to the near record inflation,
right.
the record illegal immigration,
right.
the record crime, and they supported these policies. They have voted with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden 100% of the time. And that's the problem. The problem is they won't debate because they can't debate, because they can't defend their own policies.
They can't.
Their policies are very, very unpopular. They're very destructive. And if American voters take the time to actually understand the choices they have between the constitutional conservative candidates and the far left woke liberal Democrats, then they're going to see that they agree with the conservative agenda that's going to bring back prosperity,
Right.
that's going to lower inflation,
Right.
that's going to reduce crime, that's going to secure the border, that's going to lower these fentanyl deaths, and everything that people want, get indoctrination out of our schools,
Absolutely.
improve the education system. You're not going to get that if we continue to vote people like Lois Franklin, my
Absolutely.
opponent Joe Casello,
Right, exactly.
any of these Democratic hacks, and that's what they are.
That's
They
exactly
don't
right.
have their own ideas.
Right.
They don't have their own spine. They are simply puppets of an anti-American party today.
Right. And I think you, the viewer, need to understand what America will look like if the Democrats keep Congress and keep the Senate. Gas is going to go to $6 a gallon by February. Why? Because they already put in the regulations into the Inflation Reduction Act to make that happen. Then they're going to have to then they're going to have to fill the reserve, and they're going to be refilling it with oil at $120 a barrel.
And they refused to do that when Trump wanted to do it when
At
when oil
$27 a
was
barrel.
dirt cheap.
Exactly correct. I mean, that's just the beginning. Then you're going to have your own personal IRS agent to knock on your door and to check your taxes to make sure that they're right. And they're designed to squeeze every possible penny out of you, the American public. So if you happen to be a realtor, if you happen to be a bartender, if you happen to work on tips, if you happen to be in any industry where maybe right now you get some tip money or something and it's under the table, whatever it might be, you are going to get squeezed and squeezed hard. Don't buy the lie that you have to make over $400,000 because there's going to be more IRS agents than people that make $400,000.
And they're also trying to squeeze out independent contractors and
Yes.
force them into the union employment.
Yes. Yeah, because that's money that's needed for Social Security and for Medicare. And because of and I'm just going to go back. I want to recap Social Security because it is one of the issues I ran on in 2020 when I ran for Congress. On August 14th of 1935, when FDR passed the Social Security Act, there were 3 provisions that have since been changed since the act was passed. Those 3 are this. The first one is that any Social Security tax that was taken from you, you would not have to pay federal tax on that money that was taken. So, for instance, let's say you made $100,000 and they take $10,000. I'm just keeping the numbers simple. That means you saw $90,000. Well, right now, under FDR, you would only pay federal tax on the $90,000.
Right.
But of course, the Democratic Party changed that years ago when Clinton was in office, I believe. And guess what? Now you're going to pay tax on $100,000. So what does that mean? You didn't see that $10,000. They took it from you, but you're paying tax on $10,000 you never got, never saw, or never had the ability to use that money.
Right.
That's a phantom tax. That's what that is.
It's criminal.
Okay, it's criminal. It's double taxation. Now, here's what's even worse. FDR made it so that any money you receive from Social Security will be tax-free. So you, as an 85-year-old elderly person, would not have to worry about paying tax on that money. So you'd have the maximum benefit. Well, guess what? Again, changes to the law. Up to 85% of that benefit is now taxable. You make any other money, they can tax your Social Security up to 85% of the benefit. That is disgusting and it's wrong. We're taking money from elderly people. We're stealing from these people who the system was set up to protect so that in your old age you'd be able to pay your bills. And now we're going to take away their ability to pay their bills by overtaxing them. That's just wrong. And of course, the third thing, which was done when LBJ was president, was they took the trust fund that was set up for Social Security and Social Security, and the purpose of that was to keep it solvent.
Right.
All right. So you have a separate trust fund, and they took that and they put it into the general fund. Why? So the politicians would have more money to spend, which of course has left us with a bankrupt Social Security system. So even though whether you agree with Social Security or not, I think it was a great idea. I think the purpose was, and those 3 elements that FDR needed to pass it, and I think that's why it passed, right, have been removed, and they need to be restored. So we have to stop taxing people on money that we take from them. That's just ridiculous. We have to give that benefit to our elderly people, tax exempt. And thirdly, and most importantly, we need to have that separate trust fund so nobody can pilfer it. And that's what's happening. Social Security has been pilfered by our politicians, which is another reason I'm a strong advocate for term limits.
I agree.
Okay?
100%.
Okay, so you know what? We're going to cut here and we're going to go to a commercial. We'll be back in a few minutes.
If your family is suffering from inflation and high costs caused by Lois Frankel's reckless policies, Republican Dan Franzese is clearly your best choice for Congress. Dan is a successful businessman who understands finance and economics. He's not a politician. Dan grew up blue collar and knows how tough inflation is on working families. Dan Franzese will go to Washington and fight the liberals who are killing us with inflation. Dan Franzese for Congress.
I'm Dan Franzese, and I approve this message.
I grew up in a home where principles and values were very strong. We had the opportunity to gather 1.5 million people to stand up and be the voice for our children. As an American, I will be your new voice, and I will stand up for the integrity of our children. This November 8th, vote for me, Dorcas Hernandez, running for State Representative, District 92.
Tax alert! Tax alert!
I was receiving letter after letter from the IRS.
I got Mike Vilardi on the phone and I said, Mike, I got a problem.
He took the pressure off my shoulders.
He just made me feel like I had Superman on my side.
Trust me, he's the man to go to.
IRS problems? I'm Mike Vilardi, enrolled agent. I can help. My company, Winning Tax Solutions, has always gotten our clients the best possible results. Visit us at winningtaxsolutions.com or call us today.
You've been watching the Political Power Hour with Mike Vilardi. For more information, email us at mikevilardi@gmail.com. That's Vilardi with one L. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the show. In this segment, we're going to talk about the corruption. There's been a lot of media coverage on the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden connection, the connections to China, the corruptions, the millions they've taken. Tucker Carlson did an entire show with Tony Bobolinsky. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they're screwing around at $5 million. So as a result, we're seeing that money from China directly. I mean, they have the bank accounts, they have the information, they have the emails, they have it on the computer. They have Joe Biden's voicemails talking about the meetings, mm-hmm. talking about the people. Now, he's denied everything, but we know Joe Biden is not exactly an honest person, okay? If he can look in that camera and say, hey, the economy's doing great, we're doing wonderful, doesn't matter, it's in a bear market, inflation's 40-year highs, no, we're doing great, and we're going to continue the road we're going, something's not right.
He was concentrating on his ice cream at that
Yeah,
point.
I guess it was, okay. So, I mean, now they have a special prosecutor looking into some of this stuff, and you saw the FBI basically has been used in a way that's nothing less than deplorable, I guess.
Absolutely.
Going after that pastor because he pushed that guy, and they go in with a SWAT team. Mm-hmm. What they did to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, it seems like they're making anybody who has a right wing or conservative bend the enemy of the state, which of course isn't true. The real enemy of the state is them and what they're doing, because they're abusing their power and authority.
Well, they like to talk about MAGA and conservatives mm-hmm. as fascists. Mm-hmm. But when we look at what fascist governments have done throughout history
right.
and what this administration is doing now with using government agencies like the FBI and back in the Obama administration, the IRS, against American citizens, and just limiting free speech, censoring, trying to take away our guns. All these things are right from the fascist playbook.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think if you really look at the truth of it, is the conservatives are fighting against fascism in
right.
America.
Right. It's funny. I love when they use the word racist, because that comes from page 47 of the Communist Manifesto. Mm-hmm. Okay? I mean, and it's amazing. We see it used all the time, right? You're a racist. You're this. You're a homophobe. You're this. You're that. You're that. All because they can't talk about the issues, because they don't make your life better. They make it worse. And this whole Green New Deal concept, I mean, I've been researching it a little bit, and you go back to like 1377, they had the hottest summer ever, Why? Because the actual scientists who are really experts on this stuff all say the same thing, that it's planetary alignments, and it's not greenhouse gases that are causing the issues. It's how the planets align at different times. And that's why you can go back 800 years and find it was hotter then than it is now, because how the planets lined up. So those scientists, I tend to give a little more credibility to than, I mean, how many times have I seen, I used to laugh my ass off, they talk about global warming, right? And then they'd have a summit and it's 16 inches of snow and it's 32 degrees below zero, and it's just like God's sense of humor.
Well, you're looking, everything about the climate has been a soon-to-be catastrophe, right?
Right,
we
exactly.
had the ozone layer was going to the hole in the ozone layer. We were all going to fry. Then there was going to be the droughts, and everybody was going to starve. And then there was now the melting ice caps, and all of a sudden we were all going to be under all water. And every single time we were given a date, whether it was, by 1980, by 1990, by 2000, and now AOC, obviously she is a scientist herself, working behind the bar counter.
Right, exactly.
She has decided that, I guess 4 years ago or whatever, that we have 12 years left. So I guess we only have about 8 years left.
Right.
So when are a majority of the American people going to understand that this climate tyranny is just another method of control for the far left? And there is no such thing as a climate crisis. Of course, are there things that we can do to help our environment? Yes. But they don't change the way we live.
Well, you know what? It goes to a bigger issue. And I wrote a book about this. I wrote several books about it on Bible prophecy. A one world order. Right. Now, George Bush is the first one that started talking about it, right? A global, and what does that mean? That means they want to put everything under control. And of course, it's satanic by nature. The Antichrist, as you know, is supposed to be the one that will be the one that'll take control of everything. Because why? Because Satan has always wanted to usurp God. And we see how we've taken God out of everything, which is really very problematic. And the Bible says specifically, it'd be like the times of Noah. Well, what happened to Noah? I mean, people were so wicked that the flood came and only Noah and his family got saved. Now, you look at today, you look at what's happening, you look at our politicians, what they're doing, how they're doing it. They're suppressing the people. They're starving the people. I mean, you know how many people, I just got an email about this one guy who took the shot a year ago, right? And he said, well, I believe in vaccines, blah, 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 takes the shot. He says, well, you'll know if it's poison if I die. And then he dies. I mean, people have been dropping. I mean, athletes, they have video clips, 42 athletes dropping on the field, dead, boom, sudden death. Myocarditis. I mean, we're talking about mandating this vaccine, which is an experimental drug, not proven to be effective. Joe Biden himself got 2 vaccines, 2 booster shots, then gets COVID twice. Now, can you imagine if that happened with the mumps, polio, any other vaccine? The purpose of getting the vaccine is supposed to be so you don't get whatever it is. In this case, they tell you, well, you're going to get it anyway. Right. It just might not be as bad, but you're going to get it. And then the side effects are sudden death, myocarditis. Newsom got drop jaw there. What's that called? When his lip was sagging when he took one of the.
Wow.
Okay, I mean, so the side effects have been absolutely horrendous. The news is starting to come out about how bad it is, and it seems like those who have not been vaccinated are actually in better health than those that have been. And I mean, that's another. I mean, the death rate between people 19 and 49 has been highest since COVID, since 2020, than ever before. In Europe, I don't know if you knew this or not, insurance companies are not honoring the death claims for people who were vaccinated and died shortly thereafter. Why? Because they say it was an experimental drug. You knew when you took it that there were going to be side effects, and one of those side effects could be sudden death. They're invalidating all those policies, which is crazy.
Absolutely.
But what does that tell you about the vaccine?
Right.
What does that tell you about the vaccine? So, I mean, this election is just so critical. I just hope you vote your pocketbook. You got to see clearly. I don't know too many people who didn't have a better financial life under Donald Trump than they do under Joe Biden. I know myself, I did much better under Donald Trump. My stock market gains were much better. I mean, I just took some losses because of the sell-off. I was gassing up my car at $1.69. Now I'm paying $3.69.
Well, what we need, excuse me, for this republic to survive
Yep.
is for the voters to look past party affiliation.
Yes.
Look past party loyalty. There's a reason that George Washington warned us against political parties. And if we are going to blindly go into that voting booth and mark off our vote for a candidate simply because there's an R next to the name or a D next to the name, then we are part of the problem. We are part of the downfall of our American civilization. We have to start looking at candidates, and I've been saying this to some of the people I've spoken with. Don't look at me as a Republican. That's my party, but it's not my identity.
Right, exactly.
Right? I'm Keith Feit. I'm not Donald Trump.
Right.
Whether that's good or bad for you, I'm not Donald Trump. I'm not a far right-wing Republican. I'm not a quote-unquote rhino.
Right.
I am a common-sense constitutional conservative.
Right.
Ask me what I believe. I'm going to tell you what I believe. That's what I stand for. That's what I'm going to pursue. That's how I'm going to vote. There's no trickery in there. But if you're going to vote for my opponent simply because you have the same party affiliation or because he's already there or the Sun Sentinel,
right?
They decided, they made their endorsements, and in the very first paragraph in their endorsement article, they said, we can't have that much power for one party in Tallahassee. So they just, right there, foreshadowed the fact that they were not going to endorse a Republican simply because they were a member of the party in power.
Right.
So until we get past this party fealty and the fact that I'm going to vote for somebody because they have the letter after their name of the party that I support, we're going to continue to get these administrations, these Congresses, whatever you want to say, that look out for special interests and don't look out for the American people and bring us to ruin.
Well, I got to go back to what you said. You mentioned George Washington just now. So because you mentioned George Washington, I want to read George Washington's speech from October 3rd of 1789. Now, most people weren't there. They don't remember it, okay? But I want to remind you of this speech, and I'm going to read it because it's so telling. Thanksgiving Day, 1789, by the President of the United States of America, a proclamation. Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly to implore His protection and favor. And whereas both houses of Congress have by their joint committee requested me to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many signal favors of Almighty God, especially by affording them an opportunity peaceably to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness. Now, therefore, I do recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th day of November next, to be devoted by the people of these states to the service of that great and glorious being who was the beneficial author of all the good that was, that is, or that will be, that we may then all unite in rendering unto Him our sincere and humble thanks for his kind care and protection of the people of this country previous to their becoming a nation, for the signal and manifold mercies and the favorable interpositions of his providence, which we experienced in the course and conclusion of the late war, for the great degree of tranquility, union, and plenty which we have since enjoyed, for the peaceable and rational manner in which we have been enabled to establish constitutions of government, for our safety and happiness, and particularly the national one now lately instituted, for the civil and religious liberty with which we are blessed, and the means we have of acquiring and diffusing useful knowledge, and in general for all the great and various favors which he had been pleased to confer upon us, and also that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of nations, and beseech him to pardon our national and other transgressions, to enable us all, whether in public or private stations, to perform our several and relative duties properly and punctually, to render our national government a blessing to all the people by constantly being a government of wise, just, and constitutional laws, discreetly and faithfully executed and obeyed, to protect and guide all sovereigns and nations, especially such that has shown kindness unto us, and to bless them with good government, peace, and concord, to promote the knowledge and practice of true religion and virtue, and the increase of science among them and us, and generally to grant upon all mankind such a degree of temporal prosperity as he alone knows to be best, given under my hand at the city of New York, the 3rd day of October, in the year of our Lord, 1789, George Washington. Can you imagine how far we've come from this, where the president acknowledges that it is the duty of all nations to obey his will and to be grateful for his benefits?
Well, Mike, you mentioned before how the left is trying to take God out of our lives, and
Yes.
and really they've been pretty successful in it, and that's why we have these crazy crime sprees going on,
Yeah.
why we have these school shootings. We are losing, American society is losing our foundation and values.
Yes.
And I don't care if you want to call them Judeo-Christian values, but they're just common sense decency, the values of being a decent human being.
Right.
And they don't exist anymore. And that's why you see, it used to be you couldn't go on the subway at night in New York City. You couldn't walk the streets at night. Now you can't walk in broad daylight. You'll get attacked. The old man getting dragged along the street. It's absolutely disgusting. And a huge part of that is because we're losing our values. There's no accountability in our society. We're always looking to make excuses, and unfortunately, those who have the darkest sides of them are taking advantage of that.
What do you think of that law going into effect in January in Illinois that'll let murderers go free?
Well, I think any time you let somebody who's committed a violent act free on the streets, it's insanity. It's not even. I don't know how a law like that passes. I don't understand how it's considered constitutional when you think about how many people's rights are going to be infringed upon, by that person re-entering society to commit the same crimes or worse crimes. But again, it goes to show you that the left is more concerned with their ideological agenda than the good of the American people.
And that's why I got to make a plea to you, the people who are watching this show. For the sake of our nation, we cannot continue down the path we're going down.
No.
Okay? We're making everybody poor. I don't care how much money you might have had at one time. I mean, when rates go up 42%, when inflation is up 40%, when they almost triple the price of gasoline, how are people going to stay warm in the winter? Heating oil is going to be through the roof. People are working just to get by. Our standard of living here in America has so decreased since Trump was president.
Can I just say one thing before you go to break?
One thing.
One thing. I just heard in the radio Dan Baldock, the senatorial candidate in New Hampshire, he was said it's eating or heating.
That's what it is. We'll be back.
If your family is suffering from inflation and high costs caused by Lois Frankel's reckless policies, Republican Dan Franzese is clearly your best choice for Congress. Dan is a successful businessman who understands finance and economics. He's not a politician. Dan grew up blue collar and knows how tough inflation is on working families. Dan Franzese will go to Washington and fight the liberals who are killing us with inflation. Dan Franzese for Congress.
I'm Dan Franzese, and I approve this message.
I grew up in a home where principles and values were very strong. We had the opportunity to gather 1.5 million people to stand up and be the voice for our children. As an American, I will be your new voice, and I will stand up for the integrity of our children. This November 8th, vote for me, Dorcas Hernandez, running for State Representative District 92.
Text alert! Text alert!
I was receiving letter after letter from the IRS.
I got Mike Vilardi on the phone and I said, Mike, I got a problem.
He took the pressure off my shoulders.
He just made me feel like I had Superman on my side.
Trust me, he's the man to go to.
IRS problems? I'm Mike Vilardi, enrolled agent. I can help. My company, Winning Tax Solutions, has always gotten our clients the best possible results. Visit us at winningtaxsolutions.com or call us today.
You've been watching the Political Power Hour with Mike Vilardi. For more information, email us at mikevilardi@gmail.com. That's Vilardi with one L. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back. We're back here with Keith Feit. Keith, you just, before the break, why don't you tell everybody what you said?
Well, I was listening to the radio on the way down here, and Dan Baldock, the senatorial candidate, Republican senatorial candidate in New Hampshire, said that up there it's eating or heating, where people have to choose whether or not they're going to feed their families or heat their homes because of this ridiculous inflation.
And that just says so much. I mean, I remember when Carter was president, we had a very similar situation, and he basically got on the air and said we all have to sacrifice and make. And then Reagan came in, and he of course won 2 elections by landslides and was a great president, and we restored America. And that's what has to happen now. But we have to win not only the Congress, we have to win these state house seats. And you're in a race, and the guy you're running against, he's just not that impressive.
Well,
I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, can you tell us some of his accomplishments?
Well, I can tell you why Joe's got to go.
Okay, let's start with that. Why does Joe got to go?
Joe's got to go because, number one, every time he's had an opportunity in Tallahassee to protect your children, he's gone missing.
Okay, now this is Joe Casello, right?
Joe Casello.
I just want to make sure the audience knows
Yes, Joe
who not
Casello.
to vote for.
Right.
Excellent. Okay, continue.
So he voted against the parental rights legislation, which I guess means he's okay with the sexualizing of kindergarten kids, of teaching them about gender identity and sexual orientation when they still believe the other sex has cooties.
Right.
Right. He voted against keeping critical race theory out of our schools, which to me shows that he's okay with teaching our kids to hate each other, to hate themselves, that skin color is all that matters, that everything in society has to be viewed through a lens of race.
Well, now let me stop you there. You are a school teacher.
Correct.
What would you say is the most important things we should be teaching our kids?
Well, everybody likes to say reading, writing, and arithmetic, right?
Right, of course.
But I think more importantly than that, we need to teach them a couple of things. Number one, we need to teach them how to think independently, which is the opposite of what the left is doing with their indoctrination. They're trying to tell them what to think instead of teaching them how to think. I think we need to teach them how to think. So promoting independent thinking is number one. We shouldn't tell the kids what they think. We should give them information, help them find information, and then let them make decisions for themselves. Number two, we should be working on developing skills that'll help them in life. You know, I think sometimes we're too worried about content, and I teach science, I've taught history, I teach leadership. We're so worried about teaching them content so they can pass a stinking test.
Right.
That we miss out on really helping them to develop the skills they need once they get out of school. So I think that's the second most important thing. And the third most important thing is we need to teach them how to be good citizens.
Yeah.
Right. So thinking independently, life skills, and citizenship.
Right. I mean, they don't teach things like how to grow a garden, how to balance your checkbook. Practical, everyday things that you need in real life. How to manage your money is very important.
Right. And I think you're seeing some of these classes, I think they call it financial literacy.
Right.
So some of these classes are popping up, but it's definitely been a long time and there's still a long way to go in regard to that. And the other thing that Joe Casello, why I think Joe Casello needs to go in terms of education, is he's voted against expanding school choice. So I can't understand how a party who talks about equity and equality in everything they do, right? They're gonna, a black female for the Supreme Court, doesn't matter because she's a black woman. A black woman for vice president because she's a black woman, right? We have to get minorities and historically underserved communities more positions because they've been, discriminated against in the past, right? And as wrong as that was, it's not the right way to go about it. But when it comes to school choice, when it comes to educational opportunities,
right,
where the wealthy can send their kid to any school they want, but the low-income kids, the minority kids who are in the wrong zip code, they could be stuck in failing schools, in unsafe schools, simply because of their zip code, their parents' income, or the color of their skin. And that's wrong. I believe in equal educational opportunities for all kids. And no matter where they live, who they were born to, every parent should be empowered to make educational decisions that will best serve their children's needs.
Right.
So what I'd like to see is we have a government school system right now that is leaving kids behind, and mostly low-income and minority children. And I challenge Joe Casello, if you really believe in equality and helping those students out, then join me in building an education marketplace where all schools, public, charter, private, religious, are in one marketplace. They are competing for students. They are forced to design programs that are going to be desirable for parents. And let the funding follow the student, so that the parents are empowered and they say, hey, you know what? St. Anthony's is going to be better for my kid. Or Renaissance Charter School is going to be better for my kid. Or maybe, maybe it might be the local community public school, the government school. And that's great too. But to continue down this road we've been on where people, the teachers' unions leading this charge, where
exactly
Democrat politicians who kowtow to the teachers' unions, and the teachers' unions want to keep their power, but they're saying, well, if we let the money follow the students, then it's going to take away from our public schools. Well, last I checked, the purpose of our education system is the students. It's educating the students, it's developing the students, it's creating successful contributors to society in the future. It's not about saving failing schools. No. And we can't worry about that. We can't worry about if too many kids leave this public school, it's going to have to close, or these teachers are going to lose their jobs. They'll be able to find jobs at the schools where the kids go.
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said the teachers union is beholden to the Democratic Party and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So they don't want to see their power usurped, and that's what it is. It's a power play. That's where they're doing everything possible to stay in power.
And it's not surprising that Joe Casello toes that line, because if you look at his contributions, you might find 4 individuals, and then you're going to find every union, PAC, and big corporation that's funding his campaign. All my donations are from We the People.
Right, exactly.
And that's the difference between a constitutional conservative and a big government liberal.
Right. And you know what? You've written 9 books.
I have.
You are pretty accomplished. You have a PhD.
Well, Joe Casello likes to point that out kind of in a mocking way.
Okay.
Yeah, he's used it a couple of times saying, well, I don't have a PhD, or he has a PhD. Like, I don't know if that's his way of putting me down, but I'm pretty proud of how hard I worked for that degree.
No, absolutely. I think that's definitely an accomplishment. There's only a small percentage of people that can claim to have PhDs. And I think that's a tremendous accomplishment. And the fact that you've written 9 books, and I've read your books, and they're very impressive, constitutional books. I mean, you definitely are a smart guy. No one could argue that.
Appreciate that.
You're on the ball. And you want to do what's right for the people.
Right.
And that's the difference, I think, between you and Joe Casello. Now his whole life, it seems like, is a mess, is in shambles, right? He's getting a divorce. He's all over the place with a lot of things. I mean, I'll let you expound upon some of those things, but he just doesn't seem to really have first of all, his heart in the job. I don't think this is the job he really wants, and I think he just likes to again, be in power, be somebody. He's in politics for the wrong reasons, where your reasons are to help people.
Right, right. Yeah, I want to represent the people. I want to represent their interests, not special interests. And I'm not going to get into Joe's private life. His private life is his business. But he did say in his Sun Sentinel interview that his dream job was being a county commissioner. And he went over time and again. He talked about how miserable things were in Tallahassee and how unhappy he was in Tallahassee, and how he couldn't deliver for the people because he would work on something and then Governor DeSantis would veto it, would take it out of the legislation. Well, voters, I'm just saying, if you want somebody who can get something done and Joe's admitting he can't, maybe you should give me a try. My whole goal is to represent the people's interests. And that's why when you look at the parental rights legislation, over 60% of people support that.
Right.
Including Democrats.
Right, of course.
Because parents want to protect their kids. And Joe voted against that. So how are you representing the people if you're going to choose an ideological agenda over the best interests of our kids? And he's also voted against banning sanctuary cities. We see now that fentanyl is the #1 cause of death among, I believe it's 18 to 40-year-olds or something like that.
Right.
And where's that fentanyl coming from? It's coming across our southern border, which is completely wide open. And it's wide open because the Democrats, in their globalist mission, have decided that there shouldn't be borders between countries. And so what we have unvetted people coming in here. They're committing crimes. They're bringing in the drugs. We have the cartels targeting children, and all this is happening. Americans are dying, and they're worried not about the open border. They're worried about Governor DeSantis sending 50 migrants to Martha's Vineyard. Massachusetts is a sanctuary state.
Right.
They welcome immigrants, but then when they show up, they ship them out. It's the hypocrisy of the left again. But sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, they are an open invitation to more illegal immigration. Because they know if we go here, they're not going to enforce the laws. They're going to protect us. They're not going to work with the federal immigration services. So, the fact that Joe Casello votes against banning sanctuary cities says he supports Joe Biden's open border policies, which means he is part of the problem with the rising fentanyl deaths, with the rising burden on our education system, our healthcare system, our social services system, our criminal justice system. Joe Casello, and I'm going to say this again and again, he's not my enemy. I have no personal animosity towards him. He has said a few things about my stance on the issues that have been untrue, which I'll talk about in a second. But my reason for running against him is he is just wrong. And I've said it throughout this campaign. This election is not about Republican or Democrat. It's not about conservative or liberal. It's not about right or left. It's about right or wrong. Right versus wrong. Okay? Joe Casello's voting record is wrong for Florida. It's wrong for our children. It's wrong for our prosperity. It's wrong for everything about our state. And that's why I'm running. And I'm going to continue running the issues. Now, I want to debate Joe. I offered to debate him once a week in a different precinct. And I'll debate him every day if he wants, because the voters need to hear us. But unfortunately, Joe hasn't taken me up on that. Why? Because he obviously understands he can't defend his record.
Right. Can't.
You know?
Absolutely can't. And that's what the Democrats are doing. They're running.
And much like Lois Frankel did with Dan Franzese,
yeah.
Joe, when he was talking to the Sun Sentinel, spoke about how I was pro-life, and I believe life begins at conception, which is 100% true. I do believe that.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, I agree with Dan. The federal government has no place in deciding abortion, the abortion issue. But also, I've always believed in exceptions for rape, incest, and in the case of the health of the mother. And I don't care who that upsets. I don't care who agrees with me. That's what I believe. But he, of course, insinuated that I wanted to take away women's rights.
Of course, because
you know, he also said that I've been going around telling people that he wanted to defund the police, which is not true. I simply said he voted against protecting police. And you tell me, the voters, you can tell me, if someone votes against legislation that will increase penalties for attacks against police officers, if you vote against that, are you voting against protecting police? I think so. And that's what I've said. So, Joe, don't lie. Let's just have a debate on the issues. You defend your record. I'll defend my stances on the issues. Let's see who the voters like, whether my agenda or your agenda is better for them and their children.
Well, I think that's excellent. I think that, you know, he can't face you because it won't benefit him to. You're smarter than he is. You have a better platform than he does. And you're more accomplished than he could ever be. So that is why he just will never step up to the plate.
Well, I'll tell you why he should. I'm going to tell you why he should. And this, Joe, if you're listening, okay, if you're watching, if you're talking to anyone who's listening to me, all right, pay attention. Because I have spoken to thousands and thousands of voters on the campaign trail. And in those thousands of voters, there's only been one who's told me he knows who Joe Casello is. He remembers the name. So, you know, maybe debating wouldn't be a bad idea, because the people don't know you, Joe. And if you're representing them, you've been there 4 years in Tallahassee as their representative, and they don't know who you are, I'm not too sure how good of a job you're doing as a representative.
Well, he said it himself. He's not doing a good job. He can't get anything done.
Right. And he doesn't want the job. He wants to be a county commissioner. He's just biding his time until he can do that.
So, I mean, 2 weeks from now, critical election, November 8th.
3 weeks. 3 weeks.
3 weeks from now, critical election. They're going to have early voting, so people will be able to go to the polls very soon.
Next Monday.
Right, next Monday. So it's sooner than we think. Keith, we got to get people like you in the State House to keep Florida red.
And to keep Florida free.
And to keep it free. There's no question about it. And I'm pleading to the people out there watching this, please. We cannot have these Green New Deal policies going into next year. They're going to bankrupt this country. They're going to make everybody poor, and for a reason that's not even valid.
Right, right.
I mean, when you actually go back and study what's happened throughout history with the planetary alignments, and you see where you've had hotter summers, colder winters, all that stuff, and that has nothing to do with these greenhouse gases like they're telling you, and the fact that you're going to need oil anyway. What's the difference if you drill it in Saudi Arabia or Texas? It's much smarter to drill it in Texas and pay less and have cleaner energy than have to transport it all the way from Saudi Arabia over to here. It doesn't make any sense. This whole thing doesn't make any sense.
Nothing about their agenda makes sense. But if I can have one last plug.
Yes, go ahead.
Please, if you know, go to my website, www.fight2022.org. That's FEIT2022.org. You know, find out what I believe in, reach out via email, sign up to volunteer, make a donation. You know, this is the most critical election of my lifetime. And really everything's on the line in our country. And we can't be complacent because we have a Republican legislature right now, because nothing's forever. And Joe Casello doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to represent you. And I want to go there and represent your interests.
Vote Keith Fight for State House Rep. Vote Dan Franzese for Congress. This is Mike Vilardi saying good night. We thank you for watching. We appreciate the fact that you're viewing the show. And until next week, here on the Political Power Hour, I'm Mike Vilardi. Have a great night.
Thank you for watching the Political Power Hour with your host, Michael Vilardi. If you would like to see a particular candidate on our show, please email us at michaelvilardi@gmail.com. That's one L in Vilardi. We will see you next week.